Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer: I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support, such as counseling and therapy, please reach out to a therapist near you. Happy first anniversary to the Estranged Heart podcast. Can you believe it? It's been a year since the Estranged Heart became a thing, an official thing, a real thing, a podcast thing. And I wanted to put this special bonus episode out to celebrate this milestone. And I certainly did not get here by myself. And so this goes out to each and every listener, each and every person who's listened, who's shared the podcast. And most importantly, those who have entrusted their estrangement experience stories with me. Whether you've been interviewed, whether you have shared your story in whatever form or fashion, I cannot express to you the gratitude I have that you have honored me and this podcast, our listeners, with your stories. I know what it takes to be able to put yourself out there, and it's a big and scary thing, and I can't thank you enough for trusting me to carry that story for you. So I have an interview today that where I'm being interviewed by a friend of mine who also happens to be a licensed mental health therapist, and her name is Heather. And Heather and I sat down, and she asked me some questions as we contemplated what this last year has been like as podcasters, because Heather also has a podcast, and what this year has been like for us in starting our podcast and where we are today a year later, moving into our second year. So I hope that you will listen with an open heart, as my normal request is, but I also hope that you will listen so that you can know some of the challenges and struggles that come with presenting the Estranged Heart to the world, but also the wins and the successes and the joy that this work brings to me and to others. I hope you find, as I normally say in my normal episodes, some takeaway nuggets that can apply to you in your estrangement journey, even though we're talking about this podcast and its existence over this last year. So without further ado, I will present to you this interview conducted by Heather. And we'll get on with the show. Hi, Heather. Thanks for joining me today and helping me in this celebration of the Estranged Heart's first anniversary.
Congratulations. It's really an honor to have watched your journey and then to get to talk to you about it today.
Thank you. What a wild ride. This has been something that has taken off and has become something that I just never dreamed it would be what it is today. And that, is in large part because of a lot of support that I get from my community and the podcast community, and working with friends and working through challenges and celebrating the big wonderful moments that happen and things like that. So yeah, thanks for being here today and willing to share this time and asking some questions of me to talk about this last year and what it's been like to be a podcaster.
So what has it been like to be a podcaster? What are some things you have now, insights or thoughts that you didn't have when you started?
I think probably the biggest one is I had no idea. Number one, the time commitment involved. Number two, how many people look at podcasters and think they're experts in their field in whatever it is their topic that they're covering. And I think that has been probably the most eye-opening thing about being an actual podcaster. It takes a lot of time, right? There's the recording of episodes, and especially if they're weekly episodes, it's making sure that everything gets out on time, and the social media to announce the episodes that are coming, and then recording and editing and making sure everything just there's just so much involved that I didn't realize getting started, but I really enjoy doing it today.
What have you learned about yourself from the start to now? Because it is a year and a lot of growth has happened.
Tremendous growth. I think probably the biggest thing that I've learned about myself is it's okay to surprise myself. It's okay to make failures. It's okay to show up in all of my authenticity and be who I am. And some people will like that. Some people will love that, and some people won't. And that's all okay. I think that's been the biggest piece for me, is really I've learned to focus in on helping the people that resonate with me and find value in what I put out there and want to do that work. Involved with, estrangement and reconciliation, and accepting that I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Right. And that's hard. That was a big learning curve for me, is to recognize and accept and understand that just because someone else doesn't like what I have to put out into the world doesn't mean that it isn't valuable.
Please say that again.
Yeah. Just because someone doesn't like what I have to put out into the world doesn't mean it's any less valuable.
So important.
Yeah.
I think the authenticity you've approached this with is a testament to the following and the healing and you've gone at it with a compassionate tenacity.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I find that, that's what worked for me. And this is my approach to estrangement and reconciliation, and my approach to the world in general, in all of my relationships, personal and professional, is I have to come at it being who I am, because that's when I can step up and into my purpose. That's when I can bring all the things to the table that other people want and or need. And that doesn't mean all people, but it means some people. And that was my purpose in starting this podcast. I started it and I said to myself, if I help just one person by putting this podcast out there, then I will have been successful. That was my definition of success at that point. And it's far exceeded that. Still, that is my mantra every day, is just helping the people that I can help. I'm one person. I'm not a conglomerate that can help millions and millions and millions of people. And that's not my style. My style is much more personal and authentic and being real and in the present with what we have in reality. And I think that that's what people seem to resonate with. That's the feedback that I get from people, is that, quote, "You're so real. It's like talking to my best friend," that type of thing, when they actually talk to me, and then they can put those pieces together, right, from the podcast and then actually speaking with me. So showing up as who I am, as I am, is what it's all about.
Mm. You're tackling a topic that is highly vulnerable, painful. It needs a personal touch. It needs a gentle, firm approach, which you have because you understand it, you know. And I know, having seen some of the testimonials, when people follow through with your process, as you have found it to be successful, they are successful.
Yeah.
And and it's incredible. Can you talk a little bit about the podcast is coming up on a year, but you didn't start this just with the podcast. Can you give a little backstory?
Yeah. So knows who listens to the podcast and understands that I was estranged and have now reconciled with both of my children, two daughters. And during that estrangement, I started a support group in the area where I live in person. And then that kind of developed and grew into an online support group. And so I've been working with moms, with estranged moms in that support group for about 5 years now. And then that worked its way into coaching. And because people reached out to me when I reconciled with my daughters, they were like, well, what did you do? How did this happen? And I think that so many people, because it's such an emotionally charged area, and for parents and adult children, there's a lot of shame involved. People don't reach out. And so when I started talking about it, it helped to open those doors for people to feel like they could talk to me about things. And then that developed into the Estranged Heart. It was like people were asking, they asked me at a couple of different points if I had a book. And I said, no, I don't have a book. And I thought, well, my goodness, it could take me forever to write a book. So I thought, well, what's the fastest way to get this information out there for folks? And that's when I decided to do the podcast.
Hmm. Wow. Can you talk about what it's like to experience that reconciliation with families, to walk through that with them and to see that happen for them?
Oh my goodness. It's one of the, mm, and I get emotional when I think about it. It's one of the biggest joys of doing the work that I do. When you see a mom who has come to you and is just absolutely shattered and distraught because she doesn't have her kid or kids in her life. And she reaches out and says, I don't know what to do from here. Can you help me? And she's engaged and she is wanting to learn and to grow and to do whatever it takes to come back into relationship with her children. And then to watch that process unfold is magical. It really is magical. I'm a cheerleader for my clients. You know, I sit there and I'm the proverbial shoulder through Zoom for them when they have rough days, and I'm there to cheer them on, and I'm there to help them to celebrate their wins. And it's a big part of what I do is help them to recognize the big work that they're doing, because a lot of times they don't feel like they're making any movement. They don't feel like anything's changing because they're not actually in relationship with their child yet. And so I remind them a lot of the things that they are doing and have been doing that will eventually lead them to that reconciliation. So out of just this year, I've had moms that I've worked with. 8 of them have reconciled with their adult children, full reconciliation, and 2 of them have had doors that were previously slammed shut that have opened. They're not in full reconciliation, but there's been movement on things. And these moms have followed this process that I have, and they've been committed to that. And I can't tell you how amazing it is to get the email or the phone call that says, oh my God, Kreed, my kid just walked through the door. Oh my God, Kreed, my kid just emailed me. Like, they answered my phone call. It's amazing. And what is astonishing, I think, to them is oftentimes the outreach from the child hasn't happened until the mom accepts where they are at and lets go of the incessant need to reach the child, and instead focuses on themselves and the inner work and things required for that. And then seemingly magically, the child just naturally gets curious about the parent or reaches out and things like that. I've seen that happen more often than not. And same thing for, also work with estranged adult children. And I've had one estranged adult child client that I've worked with who reconciled with her mom, and and that was after many years. I think it was 6 or 8 years. And even though they reconciled, then there came a time when it got rough again. And so it's really important to recognize those differences and what it means to reconcile, and then what it means to stay reconciled, right? And to understand that it is likely to ebb and flow. And you will have, as with every relationship that we have, things will not remain happy all the time. And then how do you navigate through that? So those are things that I help teach parents and kids about. When you reconcile, it's fantastic and wonderful that you've done your work. We're going to hope that the other person has done a little bit of work on themselves as well, if not fully, because that's what will change the entire dynamics of the relationship and give you a chance to have a healthy and sustaining relationship moving forward. So when I get the nasty, reviews of the podcast, or someone reaches out by email and talks about how ridiculous what it is that I'm doing is, I look back at the successes that these moms and kids have had, and that's okay, because I know that this is working. I know it works. I did it. My clients are doing it, and we're having success, and parents and children reunited. And that's fantastic. That's the purpose of my work.
It's a very subjective and individual event to have had the estrangement happen. So it sounds, in how you're talking about it, very specific to each person, how that process will go.
Yes.
And then maintaining it. So maintaining it, I imagine, is just as important as far as staying in the work and doing the work as it is from when they started the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just like, I relate it to like a marriage, right? You can't go into a marriage and think that you've dated this person and you've done all these things to get to this point, and you've done things together, and you spend time with each other, and then all of a sudden you get married, and then you're like, oh, well, I don't need to keep that up, kind of thing, and expect the marriage to last. It won't. Every relationship needs someone doing their work, in my opinion. I'm still in therapy. I've been reconciled with my children now for 5 years. I'm still in therapy. I'm still working on myself, because I don't ever want to go back to the way that it used to be. I want to continue to move forward with me as an individual in my life and doing things for me. And I want to continue to move forward as their parent and be able to have successful, healthy relationship from here until my time is over. Yeah.
And you spoke to that earlier about people working on themselves, doing their own work to bring into the renewed or new relationship, because I suppose if you went back to the way it was, it would end up in the same space.
Exactly.
So that work, talk about the importance of that, the therapeutic interventions that are part of this.
Yeah, I really cannot state how important therapy and inner work is in this process, for a host of reasons. Number one, for your own sanity, in order to just be able to function in the midst of your estrangement, to be able to have that space of diving into a little bit of, what does this mean for me? how did we get here, my relationship with my parents, and looking back and into my own past. At the same time, my clients have done a lot of fundamental work in therapy generally before they start working with me. And those are the cases that I generally see the most success with, are the clients who the parent is in therapy, here's my podcast, says, I want to coach with you. I've been in therapy doing my own work. And let's just talk for just a second about the difference between therapy and coaching, right? And I generally explain it in a very simplistic way. Therapy is like looking back. Coaching is like looking forward and working on what we're going to do moving forward. And therapy is helping me to discover, how did I become who I am today? Right. And understanding those dynamics so that then you have choices to make on, how do I want to change? Do I want to change? What is this going to look like for me moving forward? And then that's when I start working with my clients, and what's this going to look like when the time comes that we can reconcile? And my clients stay in therapy. So the therapist and I are working as a team in helping this client to become their best person for themselves and their best person as a parent or as an adult child in the world. So it really makes for what I call the dream team, is when myself and the therapist are working with this client, and I see success. I mean, it just, if you're willing to dive in and do the work and look at your stuff, I say, look at your stuff, and it's really hard. It's not, there are days when it's not a pleasant journey. It's really hard to look inward and realize the mistakes that you've made, because we're all human. Not a parent on this planet hasn't made mistakes. And to help learn some grace for yourself, because you are human, you are going to mess up, but you can repair. What's important is when the rupture happens is how you repair it. And that's what we talk about.
Mm.
Yeah.
It seems so, listening to you explain it that way, I would have a place to do some of the messy stuff that doesn't belong in the space in my working with you to reconcile. Like, I can go and fuss and emote all my things about my kiddo if I were the parent, a strange parent, but then come and sit with my kiddo and not have to do that
Right.
messy stuff, right? We can just do the work, get into the work.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. On what does that relationship look like? How do we want this to look moving forward? What can we do? What do I need to do differently so that my child can be seen, heard, and validated? And those types of things that begin to heal that relationship. Yeah, it's beautiful when it happens.
Yeah. And the individual therapy also feels like it would be a place to learn how to treat myself. So then I would be treating those around me differently.
Yes. And that is exactly what happened with me in my therapy. Besides learning, how did I get to where I was at that point in time when I was estranged from my kids, and learning, how did I become the parent that I was, learning what I call giving myself grace. And instead of, because I was really good at beating myself up, I was really good at, I've screwed up, I don't deserve this. And it was just awful. And it affected every relationship that I had. All of my friends, relationships at work. I mean, it just, because I just felt like I wasn't worthy. I wasn't, if my kids don't talk to me, then what the hell kind of a human being am I, kind of thing. And I learned to have some grace, and eventually began to learn to like myself again. And then that's when I started to see the shifts in my, and this is what I talk about with parents, because they're like, well, how is my kid going to see me that I've made? And I'm like, well, number one, it's really good when you can start seeing these changes in your other relationships, and you can practice all this new stuff that you're learning, right? You get to practice that before your kid comes back. And then when your kid comes back, they're like, oh my gosh, what has happened to her? She has changed. There is this different person here. And then they naturally begin to soften. because they're seeing something different from you. They don't have to be defensive. They don't have to be on edge. They don't have to be uptight and ready to wield the sword right back at you kind of thing. They can learn that you're not there to attack them. You're not there to force them to do something. You're there to simply be that. What I talk about a lot is no longer a manager, but a consultant for them. And it just changes the entire dynamics.
You changed your role so they could change their role.
Exactly. Yeah. And I talk about this in the podcast too. My kids have not gone to therapy for estrangement and reconciliation. Like that never happened. They haven't gone to therapy for things like that. So when I hear parents say, well, I can do all this work, but what if my kid's not in therapy? And my response to that is they don't need to be right now. If you're willing to do the work and change you, they will change and your relationship will change regardless of whether or not they've had therapy. And then you can be this guidepost that says, hey, I got here in part because of therapy. And then that could inspire them to get into therapy as well. Yeah.
Right. You are leading by example, experience, knowledge, and wisdom, firsthand knowledge and wisdom that's so valuable.
Yeah.
From the start, I've been so excited you're doing this work because I will say, as a therapist, we don't get specific training in this necessarily, other than family dynamic sort of things. But this is its own genre in relationship issues.
Totally. And I work with therapists also in helping them to understand the dynamics, teaching them the dynamics of estrangement and how, I mean, as you said, as a therapist, you guys are trained in family dynamics, but estrangement is such a niche thing. And there are things that you can do as a therapist that can potentially make things worse instead of making them better. And that, without intent, you're not sitting in the therapist chair saying, I'm going to do what I can to disintegrate this relationship. That's not what you're doing. But because estrangement is, like you said, it's such a niche thing, it's really hard to if you've not experienced it, to understand the dynamics of it, to understand really what is happening on all sorts of levels for both the parent and the child, and how to bring those two back together in a way that when I work with clients, there are times when I reach out to the child, and in part because I'm a coach, I'm not a therapist that's working with this client and then the confidentiality and all of these things that therapists have to abide by. I don't have that. And so I can really be with both parties and helping them, validating where each one is at and helping them to begin to see how they can come back into a relationship together. And a part of that is because I too have been on both sides of that fence. I've been an estranged adult child and the parent. So it really is it's a different flavor. There's just so many different dynamics involved. And it was interesting. I did a training with Dr. Coleman, who's the leading expert in the country, a psychologist who works with estrangement. And when I was in that training, there were 2 coaches, and then the rest were all mental health therapists in this training. And so many of them were asking him, well, I have this type of client. I don't know what to do. I don't, what about that client? And those types of things. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, but I haven't answered that. I know. And it was really interesting and eye-opening to me at that point in time. I was like, wow, okay, there is this need. And so that's when I put it out there to begin working with therapists and helping them to understand the dynamics, something as simple as, I say simple, it's not simple, but an amends letter and writing an amends letter. It really is communication, and how you style that can make or break. And that's when I talked about the 2 cases where the doors have been opened that were previously slammed shut. I worked with them on an amends letter. And that's what got the child to at least open the door, not come back with, all the attacks and things like that. And therapists don't know how to do that. They just don't. They don't understand what needs to be said and how it needs to be said in a way, because they're working for their client instead of understanding both sides of that and working with both. And that's how I look at it. Even though if the mom is the client, is my official client, I'm, in my mind, the mom and the child are my client. And so I'm always working from that lens and that perspective. Yeah.
Right. So I may have said this before, but you're treating the whole family like Dr. Mnuchin did in the day, that many therapists are in awe and wish the world would work in that way still, with insurance and other such things. But you're healing the whole, not just the bits and the pieces.
Correct.
Other eye-opening experiences for you in doing this work and in doing the podcast?
Yeah, I have several. I knew going into this that a large part of what causes is trauma that happens in the lives of the parent and or the child in their younger childhood. But I didn't realize how much that affects. I mean, it's in every single case that I work with, that I hear about, because there are people who reach out to me that aren't my clients, that just reach out and share stories. And so, but in every one of those stories is trauma. Trauma is in somewhere along the way. A couple of interesting things that I've noted: there's a fairly significant piece of the population of those who are estranged that there's addiction issue somewhere along the way, whether that's alcohol, drugs, gambling, food. There's addictions somewhere in there. And that was, again, a little eye-opening for me. I recognize that I've heard stories, but didn't realize how prevalent it was. Another interesting piece I find very interesting, and I wish someone somewhere would do a study on this. A lot of estranged moms are in the helping professions. Nurses, therapists, somewhere along the way, teachers. It's really very interesting to me, the number of moms who are in those fields who end up being estranged from their kiddos. So don't know what that's all about, but I would love to learn more about that. Yeah, that's been very interesting. And I'm, again, not just because of people writing in or being my clients. I have this support group of over 800 members right now, and it's just like one after another. They talk about, oh, I'm a retired nurse, or I'm a nurse, and it's amazing. So there's that. Let's see. I find that a large portion of estrangement tends to begin when the kids are of college age through their early 30s. And if we think about that, the college years of transition and getting, quote unquote, out from under mom's thumb and being able to be their own person and trying to figure out who they are in the world, right? And mom is like, oh no, they're out of the house and now I have to have more control and checking in incessantly and things like that. And it ends up having this divide. And then in their 20s, they're graduating from college and they're starting their careers, and some of them starting their families, or becoming married and engaged, and really separating from mom. And moms have a really hard time with that. So many moms have their lives wrapped up in the life that they don't have their own life. And so when the kids naturally, as they should be doing, growing and moving away from mom to create their own families, moms have a really difficult time with that. Because that's been their life for a couple decades, right? So it's really hard. Let's see. I think one of the interesting things that happened to me fairly early on with the podcast is I received a really, really rough review from an estranged mom, and she was not happy with me. She did not like what I was saying. She did not like the approach, and stated such in her review. And I was just like, oh my heavens, what? I mean, it was like I said, it was early on. And what do you do with that? And I have to say, several months later, I ended up talking. I got this email and scheduled this appointment to talk with an estranged mom, and talked with her. And she just, she was like, it's just amazing to talk with you. I've listened to your podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time. I spend like an hour and a half with her. And at the end of that talk, she says, so I'm the person that wrote that bad review about you, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to change that review. And I just thought, what would have happened if I had written something and said something really nasty back to her, right? She's entitled to her opinion. She was entitled to say, I don't agree with you, and that's okay. However, she also took it another step forward to find out, well, let me talk to this person. Let me just don't take what I'm hearing on this podcast, that maybe there's something more there. And when she talked to me, she found out there's more there. And she went back and changed her review, gave me a 5-star review from there, and then ended up going on to another support group online that had several thousand members, and talked about her experience in talking with me and the podcast. So, another example of when you think that life is over or things are really bad, or, oh my gosh, that type of thing, things can change when you least expect them.
Mm.
When I started talking to her that day, I had no idea she was the same woman. And so I just went on with my normal self, and then found out at the end of it that it was her. So that's why I'm always telling moms to not give up hope, to learn to live. You don't necessarily have to, I describe it as, you don't necessarily have to have this big bonfire flame of hope, right? But you can have the little flicker. Just keep that little flicker of hope alive. Go on with your life. Be in therapy, working on yourself, and keep that hope alive, because we don't know what the future holds. We don't know. And you can't say 100% that my child is never going to come back. You don't know that. You don't know that. Things happen that we don't expect. Things come out of the blue. You never know. And I like to tell my clients I have the word hope inked on my skin, and there's a reason for that. And I follow with that. Don't hope so much that you can't function in life because you're so focused on that, but maintain that little flicker of hope.
Mm.
Yeah.
Powerful, powerful. You also doing the work and the healing and the things for yourself leaves more space for the possibility of.
Yes.
But when all your mess is right there, there's no room for something else to come in.
Exactly. And when you can do the work on yourself, begin to clear that. I use an example of, like, you can't bring more clothes into your closet. Eventually, it's so stuff packed that you have to take some clothes out in order to bring something new in. And it's the same way. We have to be able to unpack some of this stuff from our background, from our history, things that we've experienced in our life, unpack that, say, I no longer need this piece. I no longer need that piece. Be able to set and let those things go, so that other more of what you want can enter into your life. Yeah.
Very important intervention there, right?
Yeah.
What's one thing, if someone has not listened to your podcast and has no idea and just comes in, what is one takeaway you'd like them to have?
One takeaway. I think,
I'm sure there's 27,000,
yeah,
but we'll just do one today.
I think the thing that is most important to me and most important in the work is curiosity for self. It's really curiosity about yourself, as well as why did my child choose to estrange? Right. And I've not yet met an estranged adult child or heard from an estranged adult child who has said, I estranged because I just don't like my parent and I don't ever want to hear from them again. It's never, ever about that. It's always that their behavior may be demonstrating that, make you think that, but that behavior is covering hurt beneath. And that is what I encourage folks to get curious about. I talk in my intro to the podcast about sitting down and listening with an open heart. And to me, that's being curious. It's opening up and saying, I wonder what this would be like if it wasn't that they didn't like me. What else could it be? Kind of thing. So I think that would be my takeaway from that.
Mm. Understanding that every behavior serves a purpose.
Every single one. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not generally what we think it is on the surface, right? Yeah. Got to get beneath.
What's next for you?
Oh my gosh. I'm looking forward to the second year of the podcast. 2023, I think, is going to be amazing. I have lots of things planned for 2023. Some of those include a book. So I'm going to get around to writing my own memoir of my own estrangement experience and many workshops. I'm actually looking at some retreats as well, and not just for estranged moms, but I'd also like to do some for therapists and retreats in this field, those who would like to get and learn more about this. And I will tell you, if you are a therapist who is listening and work with folks who are estranged in some form or fashion, I cannot tell you the number of people who contact me on a daily basis who are searching for therapists who, quote, get estrangement, end quote. I hear from moms all the time about, I went to this therapist and she was zero help to me, right? She didn't get estrangement. She told me to get on with my life and not worry about my kid. And, and again, therapists are not doing this with any ill intent. It's just, they either don't have the experience, the knowledge, what have you, that is needed around this. And so we need more therapists who understand estrangement. As a matter of fact, this afternoon, I'm meeting with a client who is searching for a therapist who understands estrangement, and she has not been successful in finding them, and I get them from all over the country. Now, the podcast obviously is international, but I work in the States with helping folks to find therapists who either, if they don't have estrangement experience, which most do not, is helping them to find someone who can get as close to that as we can, right? So 2023, I would love to be able to help more therapists learn more about estrangement so that we can help these folks that are searching desperately for it. So that's a little bit about what 2023 is going to be about. I'm hoping to have more interviews with estranged parents and estranged adult children. And I'm also working on a support group. I was hoping to get it launched in September, and I think it's going to be after the first of the year before I can now, but a support group for estranged parents and estranged adult children, not from the same family, a heavily moderated support group so that they can learn from one another. And we can help hopefully build some bridges in helping people to understand the other side. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Wow. The value you bring is so needed. And I'm wondering if you view everybody that you're working with as your heroes, because I'm listening to you. I feel like the watching that process, it feels like they're heroes in doing the work.
Totally.
Yeah.
I tell them all the time, I say, that was big, brave, right? It really is, to be able to step into that discomfort, to step into the vulnerability that is required, it just is, to be able to do this work is nothing short of brave. Nothing short of brave. And so every one of them are my heroes.
Mm.
Everyone. I'm
Oh,
so proud of them. And I tell them that I'm like, I'm so, so proud of you and the work that you've done, regardless of whether or not your kid, you're reconciled with your kid, the work that you've done for yourself. You are giving yourself that gift of coming home to yourself and to the world at large.
mm.
And when people say they can't change the world, I'm like, when you change yourself, you are changing the world, because it's the ripple out effect. It affects everyone you're in relationship with. So yeah.
Huge ripple effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. My clients are my heroes too. I totally get that. It's I get so jazzed when they do that thing and they go, oh, wow.
Right. The aha moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love them. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Every bit of transformation you've gone through, every bit of healing you've gone through, you're pouring that back into the work you're doing with others. And that's so amazing.
I hear often from parents, and I was there. I once was in that spot where estranged parents are like, just think this is the absolute worst thing in their life. And it is. When you are in it, it shatters you. It brings you to your knees unlike anything else ever can. At the same time, and this is the important piece of my support group that I currently have online, we talk about the purpose of the group is not only to find community and people who understand and get the pain that's involved with this, but to also use that pain as fuel to move through the pain to get to the other side instead of remaining stuck. And I wanted to just share with people that there are several different support groups out there for estranged parents, and each one of them are numbered in the thousands of members. And I've had my support group for 5 years, and I have just over 800 members. And the reason for that is because of the rules that apply to my group. My members are not allowed to name call their kids. They're not allowed to talk bad about their kids or their kids' partners or other members, but they have to come at things from a curious perspective instead of an accusatory judgment tone. And a lot of parents, and I was there too in the very beginning, are just not ready for that. So it's kind of matches my podcast, right? There are people who will resonate with it, and there will be people who will not, because of whatever area the time that they're in their estrangement. Generally, in the very beginning of your estrangement, less open, you're closed off, you've shut down because it hurts. It hurts. And so you want to protect yourself. But I'm all about moving through the pain and not getting stuck in it and being able to move forward and have successful relationships. So that's the purpose of the podcast. That's the purpose of the support group, and all the work that I do is focused on that. Yeah.
You're setting them up for success.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Curated. Yeah. You've curated the space in a respectful, thoughtful, compassionate way that just begins to set the tone for them to be thoughtful and compassionate toward themselves and their family.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. You're pretty cool.
Thanks, Heather. In my mid-50s, I've been through life a little bit. I've had a few experiences, and it's just who I am to be able to come to try to take those experiences and use them for good somehow, some way. And it's not always easy. There are times when I don't want to record a podcast. There are times when I think, well, I really want to record this, but I don't think that it'll be accepted. And then there's times when I'm like, I can't wait to record this podcast episode. So I have my good days, I have my bad days, just like everyone else. And when I meet with clients, I've had a couple of people say, oh my gosh, talking to you is like talking to a celebrity. And I'm like, oh my heavens, no. I am only Kreed, and you will find out that I have good days and bad days just like everyone else, just like you. I'm no different than you. I've been where you're at, and I want to help you get to where I'm at, right, in my estrangement and reconciliation experience. And so I'm just Kreed. I'm just Kreed.
You are Kreed, and you are real and authentic. Being able to be in your space does feel celebrity-esque because it's not the norm, right? People
It's
are out
different.
there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You offer something that just feels like, how could this be real? But it is, because it is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how to not be real. I really don't. It just is, it's just who I am. And that resonates with some people, and some people it doesn't, and that's okay. I'm here and ready and willing for those who I do resonate, that do resonate with me. And those are the folks that I want to work with and help them to have a happy and fulfilling life with all of their relationships.
Everyone that belongs in your space will show up.
Yeah.
And what you offer will land where it belongs.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
How are you going to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of helping more than one person? Your goal has been met tenfold, more than that.
Yeah.
How are you going to celebrate?
I will be working that tomorrow. Well, I will be working with clients tonight. We're recording this on Sunday, the 30th. The anniversary is tomorrow on the 31st. And I intend to take some time really to sit down, just as is my nature, is just to sit down and really, truly reflect on where I've been and what this journey has been like for me, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And to figure out where were my challenges, and how do I want to do that differently, or those types of things moving forward, and where's the need, and that's where I'm here to serve. So I'll do some reflection and journaling, which is what I tell my clients to do. So I follow my own advice with things like that. And that's how I'll celebrate.
I'm going to take a moment tomorrow in honor and respect and reflection of what you've done, knowing the impact on people's lives has been tremendous.
Thank you, Heather.
It's only going to continue.
Yeah, it's been my honor. Truly. I am honored that people trust me enough to share their stories, which are really highly emotional, shows such vulnerability. And the fact that they choose to share those with me and trust those experiences with me, it's an honor. And it's one that I don't take lightly, ever. I could be doing this for the next 20 years, and I will always come from that stance of feeling very honored to be able to sit with people in their estrangement and reconciliation experiences. I'm just truly honored to have been given this podcast as a platform to be able to get my experience out there and my way of coming back into relationship with my girls and helping others to do the same.
You're taking the estranged hearts and you're doing heart transplants.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I have. Thank you.
Anything else that you would like people to know as you close out this first year and head into your second year?
I think the only thing I want to say from here forward is I'm truly grateful for those who have listened to the show, who have shared the show with others. I hear that often. I found you through so and so, through this group, the other group, on this article, the other article. I'm super grateful for anyone who has shared the podcast, because you're also helping others in this space that we find ourselves in. So thank you to the listeners. I love all of you. And yeah, here's to year number 2 and even bigger and better things for all of us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you for having this conversation today.
Thank you for being present with me. You're such a gem. Love you.
Love you. Thank you for the opportunity to know you.
It goes both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Kreed.